Brian, what's on your radar?
Trying to figure out what motivates Kyrsten Sinema has become the great guessing game of 2021. For some, the question is easy. It's obvious, people say, that she just wants to cash out quickly and become a corporate lobbyist, which is why she's doing the bidding of her corporate donors. But there are big problems with that theory. And the biggest is that pissing off all of your colleagues and screwing up a piece of legislation they hope is the crowning achievement of their careers is a terrible way to build the kind of warm relationships a lobbyist can sell to big corporations. Sure, she could sell herself as a Republican lobbyist, and she could lobby Republicans, but K Street has an oversupply of those, and they're better off hiring an actual registered Republican than Sinema. And plenty of recently departed Democratic senators have been able to cash in without making spectacles of themselves or threatening the party's entire agenda. Heidi Heitkamp, the North Dakota senator, is making a mint to make sure that we can't tax inheritance. And that is one of the worst things that she could be doing with her time. That we let the super rich pass their wealth down tax-free is one of the biggest drivers of the racial wealth gap. White people currently control most of the country's wealth, and if you have no inheritance tax, it's going to stay that way. But Heitkamp has plenty of company. Max Baucus, Barbara Boxer, and plenty of other Democrats are out there lobbying. It's the easiest job in the world to get. If that's the job Sinema wanted, she could serve out her term or even do 2 terms, build good relationships, and then cash them out. It's a very easy path to walk, and she knows that. What she's doing now is counterproductive to a future lobbying career. For her own part, she has said that she wants to follow in the independent, maverick footsteps of Arizona Senator John McCain. But McCain's whole shtick was his openness to the press and the public. Sinema won't talk to the press and won't talk to a constituent unless they've paid thousands of dollars to be in her presence. Her coy game is getting so strange it was parodied on Saturday Night Live this weekend.
What do I want from this bill? I'll never tell, because I didn't come to Congress to make friends. And so far, mission accomplished.
Let's focus on the 2 things that have polled best with all Americans. Lowering the price of prescription drugs.
No.
And raising taxes on billionaires.
MSNBC, CNN, even the ladies of The View are turning on her now.
When you tell me Arizona says, listen, we want this.
66.
This is your job. Your job is not to play with Manchin. Your job is to take care of what we need in Arizona and what we need in wherever you are. That's your job. That's why we put you in, because we thought you could do it better. And here you are, just blocking stuff.
And yes, that was Alyssa you just saw sitting there. Joy Behar said Manchin and Sinema are destroying the country and even cited The Intercept's reporting on Manchin's fortune he's made from coal, though she didn't mention us.
But the Democrats have the numbers to make it happen. But Manchin and Sinema are standing in their way.
Especially Sinema.
They call themselves Democrats, and they will be the ruination of this nation. Those 2. First of all, Joe Manchin is never going to vote for climate change things because he gets $500,000 a year from coal production. Kyrsten Sinema she went to some kind of I don't know what it is. She went to a fundraiser scheduled this week with business lobbying groups that fiercely oppose Biden's social and climate spending bill. They don't want their taxes to be raised, and she's on their team. These people are destroying the country, in my opinion.
Reporters from back home are saying they don't recognize this person.
Is any of this behavior right now surprising in what we've seen?
I mean, compared to the Kyrsten Sinema that we knew in the legislature, I remember covering her there as well. You know, it's night and day. It's 180 degrees. She was known as a real left winger in the legislature, and sort of, moderated herself a little bit as the years went on. Kind of moved herself into a position where she tried to build up a reputation as someone who was still, kind of far to the left, but was willing to work with, her colleagues on the other side of the aisle, even some folks who were pretty far to the right. And she carried that into Congress and kind of year by year kept moving further and further towards the center, this is simply a completely different Kyrsten Sinema than the one that we knew back here at the State House.
For Sinema, what matters is how her whole shtick is playing in Arizona. If she was taking all of this abuse and it was making her more popular back home, you could see a rationale for it. New polling from Morning Consult finds just the opposite. Among all voters, she started the year with a plus 13 approval rating. That's been wiped away, and she's now evenly liked and disliked. But digging deeper, it's even worse for her. She started with a plus 47 approval rating among Democrats, and that's crashed all the way down to plus 6. But maybe she doesn't care about Democrats and only wants Republican support. There, she's gone from minus 18 to minus 2. That's a big swing, but that still means roughly half of Republicans just aren't into her. And that's a huge problem for her because it means there's very little opportunity for her to successfully switch parties. Among independents, and this is key because she fancies herself an independent above all else, she started the year with a plus 11 approval rating, a pretty good number. Now she's sitting at minus 3 among independents. So the very people she's trying to impress and win over think what she's doing is wrong. She's failing, and the only way out is to actually cut a deal. So this big question to me of what is Kyrsten Sinema doing, the answer is she's failing. Like that's what matters. Like no matter what her actual goal is, she's not getting there right now.
I mean, I think you have to operate from the assumption that she wants to win re-election. Politicians usually do.
We could start with that. It's reasonable to start from. It's not a given, but let's start with that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, right. There's one other thing I'll toss out after, but it could be that it doesn't matter how badly or how unpopular she is with Democrats because they'll still all vote for her in the end. So a small
in the general, yes.
Right. In the general. So a small increase in Republican support is worth pursuing. I don't think she's going to switch parties, but if she did, those numbers would change in an instant. You put an R next to her name, Republican support for this person will go.
For sure.
It will reverse overnight because the conservative media will lionize her. And that's the other thing. She could just be aiming for, you talked a lot about lobbying and why what she's doing doesn't make sense from that perspective, which I understand. It could be that she's angling for some sort of media career where
she has no media experience.
She doesn't have media experience, but this
she won't speak to the media.
Right. Not right now, but where she's building some kind of profile for herself. I don't know if that's what she's thinking of.
She could be an actor.
She's very stylish. I mean, right. I know you don't like her, but we can give credit for that.
I like her in the sense that she's a charming person. Right. She's interesting. She's smart. I think what she's doing is horrific right now. But Arlen Specter is a good party switching example. If you remember, he switched in 2009 from Republican to Democrat, and the Democratic Party celebrated, gave them a supermajority, 60 votes in the Senate. He was hailed as a hero. The golden boy returning because he was actually a Democrat in the early 1960s before he had switched, 50 years earlier. Then he got primaried.
Yeah.
In 2010, and he was beaten from the left because there's still a big chunk of Democrats who are like, glad you switched parties, but I still don't like 8 of these 10 issues that you're on, or I'm still angry about what you've done over these X years. So the Republican Party in Arizona is extremely right-wing. And so if there's a faction there that's like, glad that she switched parties to Republican, but she's still a bisexual, wine-drinking, immigrant supporter.
The reality is all of that could be forgiven and, in fact, endorsed if she has, Trump saying.
If she gets Trump. No, that's the thing.
It doesn't. Policies don't matter. Nothing matters except that.
That's interesting. So she would have to, throw in 100% with Trump.
Right.
So I guess.
I mean, I think what actually the model for this is sort of what Tulsi Gabbard has done to some extent. Not switching, but in really. Garnering more than just occasional praise, but really a deep fondness from people in Trump world, from conservatives, from conservative media. So it is doable. Now, you're right. She's not doing interviews in the same way. She's not speaking to the press the same way Tulsi did. So it's different. But there is a path to that kind of thing if we're trying to explain her behavior.
Yeah, the difference. Tulsi started out with kind of a base of support through challenging the DNC in 2016 and then through challenging the regime change war in Syria. So she had built up this support. Then she moves over and plays footsie with the Republicans, and the Republicans love that, and so that builds up that, so she can kind of fuse those two things together. Whereas Sinema doesn't have any base of support. Like, there's nobody who's like, I really love Kyrsten Sinema. In the way that people really loved.
Do you think she's getting a primary challenge at this point, no matter what she does?
Ruben Gallego, congressman from Arizona, yesterday was kind of took a swipe at her and was asked. He was asked if he'd spoken with Sinema, what he thought of Sinema's position on this, and he starts out. He says, "Who's Kyrsten Sinema?" That was his joke, and then he's like, "No, I actually haven't talked to her about this, but I don't think that being this opaque about what you want out of this bill is helpful at this crucial moment." And so people read into that a gentle challenge from him to her, because he is the one that progressives are hoping to recruit. He's not the most radical person they could run in Arizona, so he's not going to satisfy it. He's not going to check every box that Justice Democrats might want, but he's a down the line progressive, former Marine. Popular politician in Arizona, and would be much more of a loyal Democrat in the seat, and to the left of Mark Kelly, in fact. So the fact that he's starting to gently criticize her suggests that the chance that she'll get a primary is high, and there's already this PAC that's out there now raising money for whoever decides to challenge her. So, in the past, the big problem with challenging an incumbent was getting the money. Right. This time, whoever challenges Sinema in a primary is not going to have a problem with money.
Maybe I'm just trained to see, when I see Joy Behar and SNL making fun of someone,
you're on their side. Yeah.
Well, it's not even that I'm on their side, but I know that's a ticket to affection from the right, to being celebrated as some kind of person who the media tried to destroy, et cetera.
Right. There is a path there.
Yeah.
The problem for her is if she stays as a Democrat, Republicans polarize and vote against her. If she runs independent, there just isn't room there in this country anymore.
She's got to call up Trump.
It's tough. That's either that or stick with the Democrats and actually vote for what the party wants to do. But looking forward to what's on your radar up next.